The early morning sun cast long shadows across the dusty main street of Whispering Creek as Willow Nelson stumbled off the stagecoach, her wedding dress torn and soiled from 3 days of hard travel. With trembling hands, she clutched a crumpled telegram that had shattered her world just 1 week prior. Regret to inform Stop Herald deceased mining accident stop claim papers require present stop. Willow had never seen Whispering Creek before, this remote Colorado mining town where her fiancé had sought his fortune in 1875. She'd left everything behind in Boston, her teaching position, her modest family home, and whatever security she had known to marry a man who now lay in the town's small cemetery. "Last stop, miss," the driver called, tossing down her single trunk. "Whispering Creek." The town looked nothing like Harold's letters had described. Where he had painted a picture of a booming silver town with opportunity at every corner, Willow saw only a dusty main street lined with saloons, a general store, and what appeared to be a struggling assayer's office. At the far end stood the Whispering Creek Hotel and Boarding House, its paint peeling but its sign promising clean rooms for respectable guests. Willow gathered her skirts and made her way toward the establishment, aware of the stares from the few people on the street at this early hour. A woman traveling alone was unusual enough. A woman in a wedding dress, even a soiled one, was something of a spectacle. The boarding house keeper, a stern-faced woman with iron gray hair pulled into a tight bun, eyed Willow from behind the reception desk. "I need a room, please," Willow said, summoning what remained of her composure. "Just until I can settle my fiancé's affairs." "Your fiancé?" The woman's eyes narrowed as she took in Willow's bedraggled appearance. "Harold Winters. He passed away in a mining accident." "I was coming to marry him, but now—" Willow's voice broke, the woman's expression hardened further. "Miss, this is a respectable establishment. We don't take in women without proper references or accompaniment, especially those in—" She gestured dismissively at Willow's dress. "Your particular circumstances." "But I have nowhere else to go," Willow protested. "I'm a school teacher from Boston. I can pay for a week in advance. Rules are rules. No unaccompanied women without references. For all I know, you could be making up this story about a fiancé. Besides," the woman added with a pointed look at Willow's midsection, "we don't accommodate women in delicate situations, either." Willow's face flushed hot with indignation. "I am not in a delicate situation. I was to be married. The stagecoach journey was difficult, that's all. Nonetheless, I cannot help you. Perhaps try the saloon down the way. They sometimes have rooms available for women in your position." The implication stung worse than a slap. Willow turned and fled, tears blurring her vision as she stumbled back onto the street, the morning sun now beating down mercilessly. She had nowhere to go, no one to turn to, and only enough money to last a few weeks at most. She made her way to a rough wooden bench outside the general store and sank down, trying to control her breathing and think. Harold's mining claim papers needed to be transferred to his next of kin, his aging mother, back east, but first Willow needed to find the claim office and determine what steps to take. "You look like you could use some help, madam." The deep voice startled her. Willow looked up to see a tall man in a worn leather vest and dusty boots standing before her. His face was partially obscured by the shadow cast by his wide-brimmed hat, but she could make out a strong jaw dusted with stubble and eyes the color of a summer sky. "I'm fine, thank you," she replied automatically, though she was anything but. The man shifted his weight. "Begging your pardon, but you don't look fine, and folks around here have been watching you get turned away from the boarding house. Mrs. Holloway's particular about who she lets rooms to." Willow wiped hastily at her tears. "Is my humiliation the talk of the town already? Small town," he said with a slight shrug. "Not much happens here that folks don't notice." He removed his hat, revealing tousled chestnut hair. "Name's Clayton Vaughn. I run cattle on the North Ridge." "Willow Nelson," she replied cautiously. "I arrived to marry my fiancé, Harold Winters, only to discover he died in a mining accident 2 weeks ago." Clayton's expression softened. "I heard about that collapse. I'm mighty sorry for your loss, Miss Nelson." "Thank you, Mr. Vaughn." "Listen," he said, replacing his hat and shifting uncomfortably. I know it's not proper, but I have a cabin about a mile outside of town. It's small, but there's a lean-to off the back where I could stay. You'd have the main cabin to yourself until you sort things out. Willow stared at him, shocked by the offer. I couldn't possibly, it's that or the saloon, Clayton said bluntly. And no decent woman should have to stay there. I promise you'll be safe. Anyone in town can vouch for me. As if on cue, the shopkeeper emerged from the general store. Clayton Vaughn's a good man, miss, he offered. Honest as the day is long. If he's offering help, you'd be wise to take it. Willow hesitated. Every lesson in propriety she'd ever learned screamed against accepting shelter from a male stranger at that. But her options were severely limited, and there was something in Clayton Vaughn's steady gaze that inspired trust. Very well, Mr. Vaughn, she said finally. I accept your offer, though I insist on paying rent for as long as I stay. A ghost of a smile touched his lips. We can discuss that later. Let me take your trunk. My wagon's just down the way. The journey to Clayton's cabin passed in relative silence. Willow was too exhausted and overwhelmed to maintain conversation, and Clayton seemed content to focus on handling the wagon over the rough terrain. The landscape around Whispering Creek was starkly beautiful, towering pines on the surrounding mountains, meadows dotted with wildflowers, and in the distance, the glint of a stream. That's Wolf Creek, Clayton said, following her gaze. Good fishing there. It's beautiful country, Willow admitted. Different from what I'm used to in Massachusetts. Takes some getting used to, he agreed. Winter's harsh, summer's short, but there's something about this land that gets under your skin. As they crested a small rise, Clayton's cabin came into view. It was more substantial than Willow had expected, a sturdy log structure with a stone chimney, a small covered porch, and what appeared to be a kitchen garden to one side. A corral held several horses, and a few head of cattle grazed in a nearby meadow. This is your home? Willow asked, surprised by its neatness and size. Been building onto it for 5 years now, Clayton replied with a hint of pride. Started with just the main room, added the rest as I could afford it. He helped her down from the wagon and carried her trunk onto the porch. When he pushed open the door, Willow was again surprised. The interior was simple but clean, with a stone fireplace along one wall, a table and chairs, a small kitchen area, and a curtained-off section that presumably contained a bed. It's not much, Clayton said, suddenly self-conscious. But it's dry and warm. It's lovely, Willow said sincerely. Truly, Mr. Vaughn, I don't know how to thank you. Clayton, he corrected. And no need for thanks, couldn't leave you stranded in town, he gestured to the curtained area. That's your space now. I'll move my things to the lean-to out back. I hate to displace you from your own home. It's no trouble, he hesitated. I should warn you I wake early to tend the cattle. I'll try to be quiet, but ranch life starts before dawn. I understand, Willow said. I grew up on a small farm. Early mornings aren't foreign to me. Something in Clayton's expression changed, perhaps respect, perhaps surprise. Well then, I'll leave you to get settled. There's a pump out back for water and the outhouse is just beyond that. I'll bring in some firewood before nightfall. After Clayton left, Willow sank onto a chair, the reality of her situation finally hitting her full force. Harold was gone. She was stranded in a strange town, dependent on the kindness of a man she'd just met. She allowed herself a moment of despair, then squared her shoulders. She would honor Harold by settling his affairs properly, then figure out what to do with her own life. She opened her trunk and removed her few belongings, 3 dresses besides her ruined wedding gown, undergarments, a hairbrush, a small Bible, and a daguerreotype of her parents. She changed out of the wedding dress with a pang of regret. It had taken months of saving to afford the simple gown, and now it would never serve its purpose. By the time Clayton returned with an armload of firewood, Willow had changed into a simple blue dress and had attempted to tame her copper-colored hair into a neat bun. I thought you might be hungry, he said, setting down the wood. From his pocket, he produced a paper-wrapped package. It's just bread and cheese from the general store, but it should tide you over. The simple kindness nearly undid her composure. Thank you, she managed. Clayton nodded awkwardly. I need to check on the herd. I'll be back before sundown. True to his word, Clayton returned as the sun was setting, bringing with him a brace of rabbits for supper. To his evident surprise, Willow took them without hesitation and set about preparing them for cooking. "You know how to dress game?" he asked, watching as she worked efficiently with his hunting knife. "As I said, I grew up on a farm," she replied. "We couldn't afford to be squeamish." A smile tugged at the corner of his mouth. "Most city women I've met would faint at the sight." "I haven't been a city woman long enough for that, apparently," Willow said with a small smile of her own. They ate supper at the rough-hewn table, the rabbit stew surprisingly flavorful despite the limited ingredients available. Clayton ate with the hearty appetite of a man who worked outdoors all day, while Willow found her own hunger returning after days of anxiety-suppressed appetite. "Tomorrow I need to go into town," she said as they finished the meal. "I need to find out about Harold's mining claim and make arrangements to visit his grave." Clayton nodded solemnly. "I can take you in. Need to pick up supplies anyway. Thank you, I won't take much of your time." "No hurry on my account," he said, rising to wash his bowl in the basin. "Take as long as you need to settle your affairs." That night, lying in Clayton's bed, which proved to be surprisingly comfortable with its straw-filled mattress and warm quilts, Willow stared at the ceiling and tried to make sense of the rapid changes in her life. A week ago, she had been anticipating her wedding and a new life in the West. Now her fiancé was dead, and she was sleeping in a stranger's cabin with no clear path forward. Yet something about Clayton Vaughn's quiet strength was comforting. He asked no questions, made no demands, simply offered shelter when she needed it most. It was a kindness she hadn't expected in this rough frontier town. Morning arrived with the crowing of a rooster and the soft sounds of Clayton moving about outside the cabin. Willow dressed quickly and emerged to find coffee already brewing on the stove. "Hope I didn't wake you," Clayton said, entering with a pail of fresh milk. "Not at all. I'm used to early risings." Willow poured herself a cup of the strong coffee. "Is there anything I can help with before we go to town?" Clayton looked startled by the offer. "You don't need to work for your keep. I prefer to earn my way," she replied firmly. "Besides, idle hands make for a troubled mind." A slow smile spread across his face. "Well, if you're determined, the chickens need feeding. Feeds in the bin by the coop." The morning passed in a comfortable rhythm of chores. Willow found the physical work therapeutic, a welcome distraction from her grief and uncertainty. By mid-morning, they were in the wagon heading back to Whispering Creek. Their first stop was the assayer's office, which also served as the mining claim registry. The clerk, a thin man with spectacles perched on his nose, shuffled through papers at Willow's inquiry about Harold Winters. "Ah, yes, the unfortunate collapse at the Blue Sky Mine. Mr. Winters had a quarter share along with 3 other partners. According to our records, he named his mother as his beneficiary. Are you a relation, miss?" "I was his fiancé," Willow said, a lump forming in her throat. "I came to marry him." The clerk's expression softened. "I'm sorry for your loss, miss. I'll need to see some documentation proving your relationship to process any transfer." Willow produced Harold's letters, including his invitation to come west for their wedding. "This is all I have," she said. The clerk reviewed the letters with a frown. "I'm afraid this isn't sufficient for a legal transfer. You'd need a marriage certificate or proof that Mr. Winters intended to change his beneficiary designation." "I understand," Willow said, disappointment flooding through her. "Can you tell me where he's buried? I'd like to pay my respects." "The town cemetery, east edge of town. Plot 37. As they left the assayer's office, Clayton placed a gentle hand on her shoulder. "Would you like me to accompany you to the cemetery, or would you prefer to go alone?" The consideration in his question touched her. "I'd appreciate your company if you don't mind." The cemetery was small, with wooden markers identifying each grave. Harold's was still fresh, the dirt mounded over it not yet settled. The simple marker read, "Harold Winters, 1850–1875, taken by the mountain he loved." Willow knelt beside the grave, tears flowing freely now. "I came as fast as I could," she whispered. "I'm sorry I was too late." Clayton stood respectfully a few paces away, hat in hand, giving her the privacy to grieve. When she finally rose, he silently offered his handkerchief, which she accepted gratefully. He wrote such beautiful letters about this place, she said as they walked back toward town. About the mountains and the possibilities, he was so certain he'd strike it rich. The mountains have a way of making men dream, Clayton replied. Some dreams pan out, most don't. Did you come here with dreams of gold too? He shook his head. No, madam, I came for the land. Always wanted a place of my own, somewhere I could run cattle and answer to no one but myself and the weather. His straightforward ambition was refreshing after Harold's grandiose dreams. And have you found what you were looking for? A small smile crossed his face. Most days, yes. It's a hard life, but an honest one. They completed their errands in town supplies from the general store, a visit to the telegraph office where Willow sent a message to Harold's mother about his passing and the status of his claim. Throughout it all, Clayton was a steady presence, neither hovering nor abandoning her. As they prepared to leave town, Willow noticed Mrs. Holloway, the boarding housekeeper, watching them from her porch with disapproving eyes. The woman's judgment stung, but Willow lifted her chin and turned away. She had nothing to be ashamed of. The next few days fell into a pattern. Willow insisted on contributing to the household work, cooking meals, tending the garden, even helping with some of the lighter ranch chores. Clayton initially protested, but soon appreciated her capable assistance. They talked during meals, learning about each other's lives in small, careful increments. She learned that Clayton had come west from Virginia after the war, wanting to leave behind the devastation and memories. He'd worked as a ranch hand for several years before saving enough to stake his own claim. He had no family left, his parents dead, his brother lost at Gettysburg fighting for the Confederacy while Clayton had chosen the Union. In turn, she told him about growing up on a struggling Massachusetts farm, losing her parents to influenza when she was 18, teaching at a small school to support herself, and corresponding with Harold after he'd left for the West. Their courtship had been conducted entirely through letters, his descriptions of Colorado and his future prospects winning her heart from afar. You agreed to marry a man you'd never met in person. Clayton asked one evening as they sat on the porch, watching the sunset paint the mountains in shades of pink and gold. Willow smiled ruefully. It sounds foolish now, doesn't it? But his letters were so compelling, so full of life and possibility. And truthfully, my options in Meadowbrook were limited. Most suitable men had either died in the war or left for opportunities elsewhere. It wasn't foolish, Clayton said quietly. It was brave. Leaving everything familiar to start a new life takes courage. His understanding warmed her. What about you? No sweetheart waiting somewhere? A shadow crossed his face. There was someone once, back in Virginia. But she married another while I was away at war, probably for the best. I'm not sure I'd have been good husband material after what I saw and did. The pain in his voice was palpable, and Willow resisted the urge to reach out and touch his hand. Instead, she said, war changes people, but so does time and healing. He glanced at her, something unreadable in his eyes. Perhaps. Days stretched into a week, then two. Willow received a telegraph from Harold's mother, thanking her for the information and instructing her to let the mining partners handle the claim. She wanted nothing to do with the enterprise that had killed her son. The message included a small sum of money as a gesture of appreciation for Willow's journey and efforts. The money gave Willow options, but she found herself reluctant to leave. She could return east, perhaps find another teaching position. Or she could stay in Whispering Creek. The local school was without a teacher for the coming term, as she discovered during one of their trips to town. And then there was Clayton. Something was growing between them, a connection that went beyond gratitude or convenience. She found herself looking forward to their conversations, appreciating his dry humor and quiet strength. She caught him watching her sometimes with an expression that made her heart beat faster. The decision came to a head 3 weeks after her arrival, as they sat at the table after supper. Clayton cleared his throat nervously. I've been thinking, he began, that if you were planning to stay in Whispering Creek, you might want more permanent lodgings. Mrs. Peterson at the west end of town sometimes takes in boarders. She's a respectable widow, no one could question your reputation there. Willow felt a stab of disappointment. Are you asking me to leave? No. His response was immediate and forceful. He looked down at his hands. No, that's not what I meant, I don't want to presume that you'd want to stay here indefinitely. You should have choices. And if my choice is to stay here, the words slipped out before she could reconsider them. Clayton's eyes met hers and the intensity in them took her breath away. Willow, people are talking about us. Living here together. Let them talk, she said, surprising herself with her boldness. I've done nothing shameful. No, you haven't. He ran a hand through his hair. But your reputation, my reputation is my concern, she interrupted. And I'd rather be judged for helping a kind man with his home than praised for abandoning him after he showed me nothing but decency. Something shifted in Clayton's expression. Is that how you see it? As repaying a debt? Willow realized her mistake. No, she said softly. That's not why I want to stay. The silence between them was electric. Finally, Clayton spoke, his voice rough with emotion. Why then? Because when I'm with you, I feel. She struggled to find the words, like I've found something I didn't know I was looking for. Clayton stood abruptly, turning away to stare out the window into the gathering darkness. His shoulders were tense, his breathing uneven. You came here to marry another man. You're still grieving. I'm grieving the loss of a dream, Willow said carefully. But Harold and we were strangers, really. We knew each other only through letters. I mourned what might have been, not what was. He turned back to her, his expression guarded but hopeful. What are you saying, Willow? She stood and crossed to him, her heart pounding. I'm saying that these weeks with you have meant more to me than all those months of letters. I've seen your kindness, your strength, your integrity. I've shared your table and your home, and I find that I don't want to leave. I don't want you to leave either, he admitted, his voice barely above a whisper. Then ask me to stay, she urged. Not as your housekeeper or your obligation, but as my wife, he finished, taking her hands in his. Stay as my wife. The proposal hung in the air between them, unexpected yet somehow inevitable. Willow felt tears spring to her eyes. It's too soon, Clayton backtracked, misinterpreting her tears. I shouldn't have. Willow placed a finger against his lips. It's not too soon when it's right. And this feels right, Clayton. Yes, I'll stay as your wife. His arms came around her then, pulling her close in an embrace that felt like coming home. When he kissed her, it was gentle at first, then deepening with a passion that left them both breathless. I never expected this, he murmured against her hair. When I offered you shelter that day, I just wanted to help. The best gifts are often the ones we never anticipated, she replied, nestling against his chest. They were married 2 weeks later in the small church in Whispering Creek. The ceremony was simple, attended by the few friends Clayton had made during his years in the area. Even Mrs. Holloway from the boarding house attended, her previous disapproval softened by the legitimacy of their union. Willow wore a new dress of pale blue, not the wedding gown she'd brought west, which carried too many memories of another life, another plan. Clayton had insisted on buying her a gold band from the jeweler in the next town over, riding half a day each way to get it. As they exchanged vows, Willow thought about the strange twists of fate that had brought her here. She had come west to marry a man she knew only through letters, only to find true love with the man who had opened his cabin and his arms to her in her hour of need. After the ceremony, they returned to the cabin, their home now, truly shared. Clayton had expanded the lean-to into a proper stable for the horses, giving them full use of the main cabin. As he carried her over the threshold, Willow felt a surge of happiness so intense it brought tears to her eyes. Are you all right? Clayton asked, setting her gently on her feet. More than all right, she assured him, reaching up to touch his face. I'm exactly where I'm meant to be. That night, as they lay together in the quiet darkness of their cabin, Clayton traced gentle patterns on her bare shoulder. I never thought I'd find this kind of happiness again, he confessed. After the war, I figured I'd live out my days alone with my cattle and my memories. And I never imagined that being denied shelter at a boarding house would lead me to the love of my life, Willow replied, pressing a kiss to his chest. Sometimes the worst moments lead us to the best ones. As the seasons changed, their love deepened. Willow took the position at the Whispering Creek School, riding in 3 days a week to teach the children of miners, ranchers, and shopkeepers. Clayton's cattle business prospered, allowing them to add another room to the cabin in anticipation of the child they hoped would come. And when, a year after their wedding, Willow placed Clayton's hand on her gently rounded belly, the joy in his eyes told her that sometimes the most beautiful endings come from the most unexpected beginnings. The following spring, as wildflowers carpeted the meadows around their home, their daughter Catherine was born with her father's blue eyes and her mother's copper hair. Standing on the porch with his family in his arms, Clayton looked out at the land he had claimed and the life he had built. "Thank you," he whispered against Willow's hair. "For what?" she asked, smiling up at him. "For walking into my life that day, for staying, for giving me everything I never knew I wanted." As the sun set behind the mountains, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold, Willow reflected on the journey that had brought her here. She had come west as a bride-to-be, been denied shelter at a boarding house, and found both a home and a love far greater than she had ever imagined possible. In the end, it wasn't the path she had planned, but it was the one that had led her exactly where she was meant to be, in the arms of a cowboy who had opened not just his cabin, but his heart.